I was 25 years old when I moved to Alaska for a new job. The natural beauty and tranquility of the place was appealing, and I was excited for the adventure. Little did I know what Alaska had in store for me. My first weekend there, I decided to go exploring in a nearby forest that locals said was ideal for hiking. I took my trusted camera with me, hoping to capture the alluring sights that my new home offered. The weather that day was crisp and sunny, perfect for exploring. As I walked through the woods, I admired the tall, majestic trees and the colorful wildflowers. The surroundings were serene, but there was also an unexplainable feeling of uneasiness in me. As I went deeper into the woods, the unexplained feeling of unease grew stronger. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it felt as if something was watching me. Giving myself a pep talk, I convinced myself that it was just my overactive imagination, and I continued my hike. The forest slowly became denser, and the light started to dim. I recalled the locals mentioning that many people didn't venture too far into the woods, but they never explained why. The silence was deafening, and I could only hear the crunching of leaves under my feet. The atmosphere felt heavier, and I couldn't shake the sensation of being observed. Up ahead, I noticed a small clearing, and as I approached it, I saw something peculiar. A circle of trees had been stripped of their bark, and the grass inside seemed unnaturally dry and lifeless. The phenomenon intrigued me, but the feeling of unease continued to grow stronger. I decided it was time to head back, as the sunlight was fading and I didn't want to be in the woods after dark. As I started my return journey, I felt a cold gust of wind, causing me to shiver. Even though I knew I was alone, I couldn't shake the thought that something was following me. My breathing became shallow, and my heart raced as fear overcame me. Ignoring the pain in my legs, I walked faster, hoping to leave behind whatever it was that I felt was stalking me. But the faster I walked, the more I felt its presence growing closer. I desperately tried to focus on the path, but the once clear trail seemed to be vanishing before my eyes. In a state of panic, I began to run, desperately trying to escape the menacing aura that seemed to consume me. I heard strange whispers in the wind, but I couldn't make out the words. They seemed to carry a sinister message, urging me to keep running. Finally, I saw the edge of the woods and sprinted towards it, feeling bursts of adrenaline propelling me forward. As I emerged from the tree line, the eerie presence vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Gasping for air, I looked back at the now dark forest and shuddered. Since that day, I've never set foot in those woods again. I don't know what was in there, and frankly, I never want to find out. Growing up in a large family in a small town in Alaska, I always felt like there were many untold stories hiding within the walls of our house. My grandparents, who lived with us, had 5 children, my mother and her 4 siblings. My mother often told stories of her younger years, exploring the vast Alaskan wilderness with her brothers and sisters. One particular tale stands out in my memory, as it sparked our interest and fear every time we heard it. My mother was 17 years old and was with her younger brother, returning from an evening of ice fishing on a nearby lake. It was a chilly November night, the moon shining brightly on the snow, casting long shadows on the ground. They were driving their snowmobile along the edge of the forest on Thompson's trail, which connected the lake to our town. A biting wind nipped at their exposed skin, urging them to speed up to get home as quickly as possible. Emerging from the tree line, in front of the snowmobile's headlights, they suddenly saw 2 glowing green eyes staring right at them. The unknown creature had a large frame, covered in thick, snow-drenched fur. Unsure whether it was a bear, a moose, or something else entirely, they cautiously slowed down, trying to get a better look. The creature stood there, motionless, for several long moments. Its unfaltering green eyes locked onto their gaze. From what they could tell, the animal was easily over 6 feet tall, even as it hunched on all 4s. It then, to their surprise, stood on its hind legs with an impressive stature of 9 feet tall. They were now certain neither a bear nor a moose could exhibit such peculiar behavior. The siblings felt a strange mixture of curiosity and terror, but knew they had to act quickly. They decided to take a risk and maneuver the snowmobile off the trail, hoping the creature wouldn't follow. Just as they started to turn, the mysterious figure crouched back onto all 4s and slowly, yet purposefully, ambled into the shadowy depths of the Alaskan forest. My mother and uncle regained their courage and raced back to the safety of our family home, where they shared the encounter with their bewildered parents. As with many such stories, explanations varied: a bear, a misidentified moose, or perhaps an overactive imagination. But for my mother and uncle, the memory of the strange, where they shared the encounter with their bewildered parents. As with many such stories, explanations varied: a bear, a misidentified moose, or perhaps an overactive imagination. But for my mother and uncle, the memory of the strange, hulking figure with piercing green eyes remained etched in their minds, a reminder of the unknown lurking within the Alaskan wilderness. Their experience became a cautionary tale within our family, often told to younger ones to remind us all to be vigilant when venturing into the great outdoors, especially at night. While I have yet to encounter the mysterious creature myself, I feel a palpable sense of awe and unease each time I walk the same trail my mother and uncle did all those years ago. I remember the day clearly. It was the middle of summer, and I had just arrived in a small town in Alaska to visit my family. My parents and siblings had moved there several years ago, and this was my first time visiting their new home. Little did I know that this trip would bring to light a family secret that had been kept hidden for decades. My parents picked me up from the airport, and we drove back to their cozy cabin, nestled in the Alaskan wilderness. During dinner, we caught up on the time that had passed, and eventually, the topic of our family history arose. As we discussed our relatives, a puzzle piece I had never known existed casually slipped into the conversation. My father mentioned he had an older sister named Emily, who had passed away when she was only 5 years old. I couldn't believe I had never heard of her before. The thought of a missing family member nagged at me, and I questioned my parents further. They hesitated at first, but finally shared the tragic story of how Emily died. It was back in the late 1960s when my grandparents lived in a remote part of Alaska, miles away from any city or town. My grandfather worked as a lumberjack while my grandmother took care of their 3 children, my father, his younger brother, and little Emily. One freezing winter day, when the snow was piled high and the air bit through the thickest of clothing, my grandfather took his children out with him to gather firewood. He knew the woods well, having spent years making a living off the land. Emily, who had never been allowed to tag along before, was finally deemed old enough by her father and ecstatic to join her brothers. As they ventured deep into the snowy forest, Emily struggled to keep up with her older siblings. The biting cold whipped against her face, and her legs ached as they pushed through the snow. My grandfather, focused on the task at hand and assuming the children were all together, didn't notice when Emily fell behind. Desperate to regain her footing, Emily tried to call out for her father and brothers, but her tiny voice was no match for the howling wind. Exhausted and desperate, she took a wrong turn at a fork in their path and soon found herself disoriented and alone. Nightfall closed in, and the temperature continued to plummet. My grandfather realized his daughter's absence all too late. He frantically gathered the entire community to search for her, but the unforgiving Alaskan wilderness can swallow you whole without a trace. It took 2 days to find her little frozen body, curled up under a tree in a futile attempt to shield herself from the brutal elements. The sudden and unimaginable tragedy haunts my grandparents to this day. They never spoke of Emily, the guilt and pain too heavy a burden to bear. As my family recounted the story, their eyes filled with sadness. Even years later after Emily's passing, her absence still looms like a specter around the family. The Alaska they thought would bring them prosperity and happiness had instead delivered a wound that time would never heal. I've been following your channel for a while, and I recently experienced something unnerving that I wanted to share. I live in Alaska and work as a park ranger, patrolling and maintaining the beautiful wilderness that our state has to offer. This incident took place last winter when my coworker, let's call her Amy, and I were assigned to monitor a remote area of our state park. On an icy cold morning in December, armed with our supplies and wearing heavy-duty winter gear, Amy and I set off to explore the serene Alaskan landscape. Our objective was to check some trail cameras that had been inactive for quite some time. The terrain was rugged, with a thick layer of snow covering the ground, making the hike both beautiful and challenging. As we hiked deeper into the forest, we noticed a noticeable change in the atmosphere. The area seemed eerily quiet, with no signs of wildlife around us. It was strange considering the time of the year, but we continued on, unfazed by the silence. Eventually, we found the first trail camera and saw that it had been ripped from its mount, with its casing shattered. We exchanged puzzled looks, wondering what could have caused such damage. We assumed it could have been a bear, but the extent of the damage seemed to surpass any bear's capabilities. Taking note of what we found, we continued on our journey towards the next camera. The unnerving silence persisted as we made our way through the dense woods. It wasn't long before we came across the second camera, the condition of which was far worse than the first one. It wasn't just damaged, it had been entirely crushed, as if something had annihilated it with extreme force. Now feeling genuinely perturbed, we couldn't shake off the feeling that we were being watched. "Do you think we should head back?" Amy asked, her voice shaking slightly. I hesitated, scanning the area for any possible threats. After assessing the situation, I agreed it was best to return to safety and report the unusual discoveries. As we retraced our steps, we realized that our footprints weren't the only ones in the snow. There were large, unfamiliar tracks beside ours, something we hadn't noticed during our hike in. Neither of us could identify the tracks. They certainly didn't look like any animal's prints we'd ever seen before. Not wasting any time, we hastily picked up our pace, trying to maintain our composure in this unsettling situation. The tracks followed us, as if the mysterious creature that left them had been stalking us the entire time. Our hearts pounded, adrenaline coursing through our veins as we finally reached our snowmobiles at the edge of the woods. Without hesitation, we climbed onto the vehicles and sped back to headquarters. When we arrived, we immediately reported our findings to our supervisor, informing him about the damaged cameras, the eerie silence, and the unidentifiable tracks. He listened attentively, his face growing increasingly concerned. He admitted that he had never encountered anything of that sort in his long career as a park ranger. The following day, a team was sent out to investigate the area further. Unfortunately, the heavy snowfall overnight had erased any traces of the mysterious tracks. They did, however, confirm that the trail cameras were destroyed beyond repair. Although they couldn't find any concrete evidence of what we had encountered, our colleagues did not dismiss our story as a mere wild imagination. Though it might not be the most terrifying tale out there, the experience left Amy and me severely shaken. We couldn't explain what we saw that day, and the memory of those unsettling tracks has stayed with us. We continue to work as park rangers and embrace the beauty of Alaska, but a part of us is always on guard, wondering what might be lurking in the vast, untamed wilderness. I still remember my high school days like they were yesterday, even though they took place half my lifetime ago, in a small town in Alaska. Our community was remote, but close-knit, and most social events revolved around the local church. Raised as a devout Christian, I had never imagined that a series of misunderstandings would turn my life upside down, causing emotional scars that still affect me to this day. In my senior year, my friends Sam and Alex and I were involved in a school-related incident that eventually spiraled out of control. At the time, Sam and Alex were part of a theater group, while I volunteered as a tutor to keep busy. Little did we know that our seemingly simple decision to take part in an unauthorized school play would come to haunt us for years to come. One chilly morning in February, we presented the idea of organizing an offbeat play to our drama teacher. We thought it was harmless fun and didn't anticipate any negative consequences. However, our play was canceled by the school administration due to its controversial theme. As a result, the news spread like wildfire, and we found ourselves accused of promoting satanic rituals. Despite our efforts to clarify the situation and explain our true intentions, fingers continued to point it at the three of us. To make matters worse, the school principal instructed his staff to keep a close watch on us. This quickly snowballed into relentless bullying from both students and teachers alike. As the rumor mill churned, the situation escalated to levels beyond my control. Sam and Alex, both short and stocky, were less affected by the gossip, whereas I, tall and awkward, bore the brunt of the relentless torment. Desperate for help, I turned to my parents and our local pastor, hoping their support would put the situation to rest. However, to no avail. The turning point came when I was summoned to the principal's office one afternoon. Upon entering, I was greeted by three stern-faced men, the principal, the vice principal, and a visiting preacher. They began questioning me about my alleged satanic beliefs and involvement, bombarding me with deeply personal questions intended to uncover my dark secrets. Unsure of how to put the rumors to rest, I chose to play along, pretending to be possessed by an evil spirit. As tears streamed down my face, I found myself doing whatever it took to convince the preacher of my spiritual liberation. It was only after several hours of manipulation and humiliation that the men finally let me go. As I left the principal's office, I was filled with a sense of shame and betrayal. But this was just the beginning. In the following weeks, my tormentors only grew bolder, leaving me feeling hopeless and powerless. The accusations and mocking continued, and my reputation as an alleged Satanist spread beyond the school. I became an outcast, branded a pariah in my own community. The constant bullying and gossip began to take its toll on my mental and emotional well-being, and I started to withdraw from the few friends and activities that had once brought me joy. My parents, who couldn't fathom the depth of my distress, were helpless in the face of this unforeseen nightmare. Our pastor tried to intervene on my behalf but was met with resistance from the school administration, who believed they were only acting in the best interests of their students. The months wore on, each day a battle as I tried to navigate the hostile environment of my once nurturing school. The local church, which had always been a sanctuary, was no longer a place of solace. Even my prayers, once comforting and consoling, now left me feeling empty. As the school year drew to a close, I found myself counting down the days until graduation. Entering college felt like my only chance to escape my torment and rebuild my life. However, the lingering effects of the ordeal never strayed far from my heart and mind. With graduation upon me, I felt a mixture of excitement and dread. I knew that leaving home meant freedom from the judgment and persecution, but it also meant a fresh start in a whole new environment. As I prepared to embark on this new chapter of my life, the thought of facing the world beyond the safety of our small town was both exhilarating and terrifying. College life in Fairbanks was a completely different world, filled with people from diverse backgrounds who had never heard my story. For the first time in years, it seemed like a fresh start was possible. I tried my best to immerse myself in this new world, joining clubs, making new friends, and pushing myself academically. However, whenever I made new acquaintances and thought of returning to my hometown for holidays, the whispers of my dark past echoed in my mind. I couldn't help but see the suspicion in my peers' eyes, wondering if they knew the truth about my past. The secret continued to be a heavy burden, and I remained gripped by the fear that it would resurface and destroy everything I had attempted to rebuild. Dark clouds began to gather when an anonymous message on an online college forum emerged, accusing me of being a once practicing Satanist from a small Alaskan town. My heart skipped a beat as I read the post. I knew that my tarnished past had finally caught up with me. Rumors spread through my dormitory and classes, and once again, I found myself ostracized and alone. Determined to confront the situation head-on, I decided to hold a gathering at my dorm room to clear my name. I invited my newfound friends and colleagues, and with a heart pounding in my chest, I told them everything about the forbidden play, the intervention in the preacher's office, and the relentless torment that followed. To my surprise, my honesty was met with understanding and empathy. My fellow students shared their own stories of being misunderstood or treated unfairly, and they rallied behind me, offering their support and camaraderie. I was touched and relieved by their acceptance of who I truly was. But the battle was far from over. One day, I received a mysterious letter from an unknown sender, containing a series of cryptic messages and bizarre drawings. At first, I brushed it off as a cruel prank, but as more letters arrived, each more sinister than the last, a sense of foreboding crept over me. Someone out there knew my past and was determined to make me pay for it. As the shadows of my past continued to haunt me, I knew I needed to face my demons once and for all. But little did I know, the biggest challenge was yet to come. My quest for closure eventually led me back to my hometown during the winter break. I planned to confront the individuals responsible for tarnishing my reputation and allowing the darkness to take hold of my life. Despite the progress I had made in rebuilding my sense of self, I couldn't secure peace until I addressed the past traumas that still haunted me. My first stop was meeting with my old principal, who was now retired. I hoped that by opening up to him about my experiences and the damage inflicted upon my life, he would listen empathetically and perhaps apologize for perpetuating the torment. Unfortunately, our meeting left me feeling cold and empty. Even after all these years, he remained firm in his conviction that the steps taken to save me were necessary. Undeterred, I then sought out the preacher who had performed the exorcism. I had found out that he had moved to a nearby town, so I drove there, emotions churning inside of me. Upon arriving, I found that he was no longer a practicing minister, but a bitter man living on the fringes of society. As I confronted him, a mixture of rage and vulnerability exposed, I was met with denial and defiance. Once more, my quest for closure was met with bitter disappointment. As weeks passed, more ominous letters arrived, each one suggesting that someone or something was watching me closely. I felt constantly on edge, unable to shake the sensation of eyes following my every move. Questions kept me up at night. Who was sending these letters? What did they want? Was my ordeal truly a supernatural one? Did the demon haunt me still? To learn the truth, I researched the strange symbols from the letters, connected with experts in the field of the occult, and sought advice from local psychics. The evidence pointed to a mysterious cult known to operate in the shadows of rural Alaska. The unsettling realization slowly dawned on me. My life had become entwined with a dark conspiracy that went far beyond the school incident all those years ago. With newfound determination, I began to unravel the threads of the conspiracy that loomed over me. The search for answers took me on a chilling journey through underground networks of cults, remote hideouts, and sinister rituals. It became a dangerous game of cat and mouse, as unseen forces sought to silence me at every turn. As the truth began to emerge, I realized that the only way to free myself from the darkness was to confront it once and for all, not as a frightened teenager, but as a determined and resourceful young adult. As the battle between light and darkness reaches its climax, the path ahead is uncertain. The fight for my future and my very soul hangs in the balance. But one thing's for sure, I won't give up without a fight. Last Saturday, I experienced something truly bizarre. I've always been a skeptic when it comes to the paranormal, but what happened that day has shaken my beliefs. I live in a small town in Alaska, where life is relatively mundane, and days pass by quietly. However, Saturday was anything but ordinary. In the morning, I decided to take a shower before heading out to run some errands. I grabbed my clothes and walked back into my room to retrieve something I had forgotten. That's when I saw it, a black mass in the corner. Dismissing it as just a trick of light or a shadow, I brushed it off and proceeded to shower. Later, I was in the bathroom getting dressed while listening to music. The quiet had always unnerved me, for reasons I can't explain. Then, I heard the bathroom door make a strange noise. It creaked and clicked, but I assumed it was the AC causing it. When it happened again, however, the door visibly shook, as if someone was trying to force their way in. With a growing sense of unease, I tried to collect my thoughts and rationalize the situation. I remembered that I could check under the door to see if someone was there. Crouching down, I saw no feet, heard no noises, and found nothing to suggest someone was standing outside. My fear spiked as the door shook once more. My dogs barked outside, reacting to something unknown. Desperate to find an explanation, I texted my dad, who was out running errands. He tried to convince me it was the wind causing the door to rattle, but I knew it couldn't be that simple. The wind never caused such a violent shaking before. After gathering the courage to open the door, I surveyed the area, letting my dogs inside to assess their reaction. When they showed no signs of fear, I proceeded with my day, but I couldn't shake off the eerie feeling. A year or two ago, I had a similar encounter. As I lay in bed, I felt my tent canopy moving as if a pole had come undone. I checked multiple times, but everything seemed intact. It went on for days, ultimately escalating to the point where I witnessed a handball into a fist and punched the canopy. My dog seemed frightened, and after discussing the incident with my girlfriend, I tried sleeping with a Bible under my pillow. The disturbances stopped. It's clear that I've had encounters that can't be logically explained. These incidents seem to target me, and I'm left with many questions. I don't know if these experiences are connected, or if they're even paranormal, but they've certainly left me uneasy. Could there be something inexplicable lurking in my small Alaskan town? I'm left searching for answers, wondering if there's more to this world than I previously believed. When I was young, I lived in a small village in Alaska with my parents and two siblings. Life was simple and calm, with the peace of the wilderness surrounding us. Our family's daily routine consisted mainly of hunting, fishing, and working on our small farm. We didn't have much, but it was enough for us. One day while exploring the woods near our home, I came across an old abandoned cabin. It was nestled between moss-covered trees and bushes, hidden like a secret treasure. Excited, I rushed back to share my discovery with my family. They cautioned me about the dangers of getting too close to potentially unstable structures, but my curiosity couldn't be tamed. Every day after finishing my chores, I would venture out to the cabin, each time daring to move a little closer. I was captivated by its mysterious past and wished the crumbling walls could share their stories with me. As the weeks went by, my fascination only grew stronger. One fateful day, I finally gathered the courage to step inside. The cabin was littered with broken furniture, decades-old newspapers, and a thick layer of dust. I pretended I was a detective, searching for the secrets hidden beneath the debris. My investigation was interrupted by the sound of movement outside. I hid behind a dusty cupboard and peeked through a gap in the broken planks. To my astonishment, I saw a boy around my age standing at the edge of the trees, silently watching the cabin. He had unkempt hair and was dressed in ragged clothes. I could sense that there was something different about him, a wildness that both intrigued and scared me. Days passed and I continued to watch the boy from afar. Every afternoon, he would quietly observe the cabin, as if waiting for something to happen. Soon my curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to approach him. As we spoke, I learned that his name was Sam, and that he lived in a remote part of the forest with his father. They had no connection to the village, living off the land and staying away from civilization. Our friendship grew strong, and we spent countless hours exploring the wilderness together. Sam taught me essential survival skills like tracking animals, making a fire, and distinguishing between edible and poisonous plants. We shared stories and forged memories that will last a lifetime. Although our bond was unusual, it was powerful and all-consuming. Fall eventually turned to winter, and the harsh Alaskan weather proved to be too challenging to continue our escapades. Sam and I parted ways with a promise to reunite the following spring. Time crawled by slowly, with each day feeling like an endless loop of cold, gray skies. Spring finally arrived, and with it came our long-awaited meeting. I rushed to the cabin, ready to greet Sam with a warm smile and tales of our separate adventures, but was met with emptiness. Their makeshift dwelling in the woods was deserted, with nothing left behind but a decaying structure and bittersweet memories. Disheartened, I searched the surrounding forest, but Sam and his father were nowhere to be found. They had vanished as mysteriously as they had appeared. Years went by, and I left my childhood home to study in a larger city. Although life moved on, I never forgot about Sam and our shared memories in the Alaskan wilderness. Every once in a while, I would visit the cabin and imagine him living his life, forever connected to the land we once explored together. Sometimes, when the wind whispers through the trees, I can almost hear his voice carried by the breeze, eternally inhabiting the land we once called our own. And so, the ghost of my past lingers on in the Alaskan wilderness, reminding me of a time when life was simpler and joy was found in camaraderie and exploration. The mysterious boy named Sam, who forever changed my life, remains an enigma, a piece of my heart lost in time, residing in the infinite embrace of the wild, untouched world that once united us.